All right, my beloved Madridistas, welcome back to Madrid and welcome back to the channel. Okay, it appears that the chemotherapy of football is coming back to Madrid because Mourinho might save your life, but you're going to get really sick in the process. Now, I know it's kind of a gruesome analogy, and I don't mean to be insensitive. My family has suffered tremendously from cancer, so I'm not trying to be insensitive, but the analogy kind of sticks, okay? Because I was in Madrid, and I remember the last time Mourinho was here, so I'm kind of familiar with what that feels like. But look, Mourinho can solve a lot of your problems, but he comes with a lot of potentially dangerous side effects. So in this video, I want to discuss sort of the rationale for him coming and kind of, why I think it can be explained and make sense. And then we'll talk about the good and the bad, the problems that he can solve, but also the problems that he can bring, because that's kind of the duality of Mourinho. And then at the end of the video, I'll just give you guys a couple of thoughts on the unbelievable Champions League match we watched last night, which I described on X as football porn, because it was like football porn. I mean, it was just absolutely amazing and tantalizing. I'll discuss that very briefly. But okay, let's start with Mourinho. And like I say, I remember what it was like the first time around. And he's such a massive character. He's just like such a dominant protagonist sort of everywhere he goes. But in terms of the reasons why I think that, look, this is probably going to happen, I mean, it certainly sounds like it because everything is heating up here. Like the rumors just seem to be consolidating. The club hasn't denied it. So I do have the feeling that this is going to happen. And let me kind of tell you the rationale first, and then we'll get into the good and the bad. I mean, first of all, and I did a short about this yesterday, but with some of the reasons. But first of all, Florentino Perez has brought managers back. Okay, this is something he's done. It's not unusual. He did it with Zizou, with Ancelotti. So it's not like this would be a deviation from, past behavior. I mean, he's done this before, so it can't be that surprising that he does it again. Number two, one of the big problems that we have is sort of player attitudes, and I can tell you that people here are so pissed off at the players. We think they're a bunch of spoiled brats, and we're just so kind of, we really are dying to get somebody in here that can just really put these players in their place and just stop all this nonsense. And honestly, Mourinho is really kind of perfect for that because he has that reputation as a massive disciplinarian. So the second rationale would be that he would deal with this issue, pretty aggressively. Number three, he did, considering the team that he inherited last time, he did bring a lot of success to the club, okay? He got to 3 Champions League semifinals. I mean, he was so close to making it to a final. He won La Liga in that sort of record-breaking 100-point season, which was kind of amazing considering that you had the Barça of Guardiola, which is one of the greatest football generations ever. And of course, Negreira was in full swing. So I think that took a lot, you got to give him a lot of credit for that Liga. And then, of course, there was the epic Copa del Rey in Mestalla that we won with that amazing goal by Cristiano, that header that was just kind of iconic, and that's kind of embedded in all of our memories. So he did have success. I mean, I think objectively speaking, he was pretty successful. Reason number 4 is that people here give him a lot of credit for a lot of player development. So, I mean, not only did he bring sort of Modric and Di Maria, Khedira and Özil and all that, but we do kind of give him credit for, the development of players that were already starters, but that really kind of improved a lot during his tenure, guys like Marcelo, Sergio Ramos and stuff like that. So that's something that's also kind of embedded in our memory. And it's funny. The funny thing about memory is that you kind of tend to remember the positive a lot more than the negative in a way. So that is kind of embedded in our psyche. The fifth reason that I think this is sort of feasible and likely and kind of explains why this would happen is that Florentino has a very strong personal relationship with Mourinho. They kind of have a very kind of close relationship. And if you consider that this is Florentino's sort of last stint, right? He's down to his last sort of year or two. A lot of people here worry about his health, because he makes very few public appearances, but he does look very frail, and people worry about his health. So it's hard to envision that he has more than 1 or 2 years left in the role. And if you think about it from Florentino's perspective, are in the last 2 years, you don't want to leave the club in this condition. Are you going to entrust somebody new? Are you going to experiment? Or are you going to lean on something that something that's familiar to you, that I think on the whole, generated good results? And I think that Florentino might want to lean towards something that he's familiar with rather than experimenting in his sort of last legs as president of Real Madrid. So I think from that perspective, it kind of makes sense as well. The sixth thing I would say is that Madridismo we feel like we owe him a lot, okay? Because, he came so close to getting to a Champions League final, like 3 years in a row, and then subsequently the club went on and just was ridiculously successful in the Champions League. And we kind of feel that a lot of that had to do with the groundwork that Mourinho laid, because he took a team that was a lot less competitive and made the team a lot more competitive. And I think that people here feel like we kind of owe him one. And so there's something kind of poetic about him coming back and kind of collecting those chips and kind of, I don't know, it just feels like something romantic, that he would come back and kind of collect that one trophy that he sort of deserved to win. So there's a little bit of that as well among Madridistas here. And then the last thing I would say is that the clash with Benfica, especially the one when we were still in the group stage, where we lost in Lisbon and it knocked us out of the top 8, that was such a stark reminder of what Mourinho is capable of, okay? Because that match, and I think I said it in my post-match analysis at the time, Benfica just reeked of Mourinho football. They're like really aggressive, really direct, really vertical, and that kind of aggressiveness, that Mourinho teams have. And I think that kind of resonated with Florentino. I think it probably just kind of refreshed his memory of, what this guy's capable of. So I think that's kind of another reason that kind of permeates. So look, I think that there's logic for this. There's an explanation why this is happening. So I don't think that it's as far-fetched. And I honestly, at this point, I think it really looks quite likely. But let's get into the pros and the cons, because this is kind of interesting. Okay, the pros are, I think as follows. Okay, number one, he's somebody that understands the pressure of being manager of Real Madrid, and it's something that catches a lot of people off guard when they come, because the pressure here is unlike any other club in the world. It's just look at what's happening now. You're second in La Liga and you made it to the quarterfinals of a Champions League, and yet it feels like the greatest disaster in the history of mankind. I don't think that there's any other club that is under the same level of scrutiny and that has just such a high bar. Real Madrid is very unique in terms of its consistent standard of excellence. But Mourinho is somebody that understands this because he's been here before and he understands the pressure. So that's kind of one positive. Another thing that I would say is that, and getting back to the issue of smacking the players around, number two, I would say that he will probably have Florentino's support more than the other managers that we've seen, more than Arbeloa, more than Xavi. I think that if you talk back to Mo, you don't play the next match, and I think that Flopper will back off. I think he'll back off this time and give Mourinho a lot more leeway. And managers need to have authority and they need to have discretion in order to command the respect of the players and to be able to manage the squad. And I think that Florentino is much more likely to give him much more leeway than other managers because of this kind of legacy relationship. Number three, like I say, Mourinho is a disciplined monster. He is very famous. I remember at the time, for the intensity of his training sessions. Like players would almost go to blows every day because he demands so much intensity in training, and that's something he really does kind of energize the squad that way. So he really is into discipline. He takes absolutely no crap, and you can view that as a positive. Now, obviously, the other side of it is that you have a higher risk of injuries and kind of players fighting. But from an intensity and discipline point of view, that is definitely a Mourinho plus. I think we can all agree. Okay, number four, I would say the style of football that he plays is kind of it's very Real Madrid football, right? He plays kind of a 4-2-3-1, which is sort of a variation of a 4-3-3, but it's very aggressive. It's very vertical, very vertical immediately on recoveries. His counterattacks were legendary. I think we all remember those kind of iconic counterattacks. Now, obviously, this means he's going to need a number 9, and if Gonzalo leaves, and I think the club is getting close to selling him, Borussia Dortmund is showing a lot of interest. If Gonzalo leaves, you're going to have to bring in another natural number 9, okay? Because I don't think that he's going to see Kylian as a natural number 9. As you guys know, I don't see Kylian as a natural number 9. So it'll be, I think that's something that would have to happen because he does like to play this kind of 4-3-3. It was kind of a 4-2-3-1, but it's a mutation of a 4-3-3. But it does suit our style of play because historically Real Madrid is a very counterattacking team, very vertical, very speedy. And I think that in terms of style, it sort of fits. Number 5, I would say that the players in the squad fit his style of play because for all of the defects that we've been identifying and discussing on this channel all year, the one thing that I think that we can say is that we have a lot of speed on the wings. I mean, we are quite speedy, and that plays very well into Mourinho's style of play. So you have deep distribution from the back, deep distributions from the midfield, and a lot of runs behind the defense with very speedy wingers. This is something that kind of the squad that we have does sort of suit that style, I think. Okay, but so those are kind of the positives and things that I think sort of fit. But let's talk about the bad because I still remember this stuff, I swear. So number 1, he's a very divisive guy, okay? Because I can tell you that I don't, Madridismo, I don't remember it ever being as split as it was back then. I mean, right now you got people that are pissed at Vini, you got people that are pissed at Kylian, and there is, kind of a little bit of discussion, but it's not that sort of binary division that existed back in the days of Mourinho. I mean, Mourinho is a very outspoken guy. He rubs people either the right way or the wrong way, so he just naturally tends to create division. And I, like I say, I don't remember any other time that Madridismo was so divided on an issue because some people absolutely love Mourinho and some people just absolutely hated Mourinho. And I remember that at the end of his tenure, I was kind of a little bit fed up because he was just such a protagonist. Everything seemed to be about him, and it didn't really suit the style of Real Madrid as a club historically. So I have to say that by the end of it, I was a bit worn down, and I was kind of like, a bit tired of it. But it's true that he's quite divisive. Number 2, as I said, the intensity of the training sessions, by the way, this guy's nuts. Like he likes to do like 2 training sessions a day. He's like, you do one in the morning, then you have a lunch, you take a nap, and then you do another one in the evening. The players hate this shit. I mean, they absolutely hate this shit. But the intensity of the training sessions is a double-edged sword. Like I sort of said before, like you can get players, you can increase antagonism between players because you got like sort of really severe tackles and stuff like that. So you do run the risk of kind of tension among players, and you do run the risk of more injuries. And we already have an injury problem as it is. So do you really want to amp up the training sessions? I mean, in one regard, yes, but in another regard, you do want to be careful because, like I say, we have a massive injury problem as it is that remains sort of improperly explained. At least I've yet to hear a proper explanation. But anyway, that's a risk. Number 3, he does tend to have conflicts with players. I mean, he does rub players up the wrong way, and pretty much everywhere he's gone, he's had clashes with players. I mean, even with Cristiano here, he had issues. So he's a player that, does create conflict with some of his players, and that's not great. Obviously, he's going to have to make up with Vini because after the incident in Lisbon with Prestiani, Mo felt the obligation to back his player, and I absolutely understand that. But of course, I can understand that to Vini and Kylian, backing a player that's said something racist obviously is something that needs to be fixed. Now, I don't think any of us can accuse Mourinho of being racist. I think that would be ridiculous. But I do think that you'd have to patch that up, and I think maybe an apology and a hug and something like that. You need to smooth that over. But Mourinho does have a reputation for getting into pissing competitions with players, and that's kind of a dangerous thing as well. Okay, another thing that you could say that is a con is, number 4, I would say that maybe you could argue that his best years are over, okay? The guy's 63 years old now. He's not the guy he was 15 years ago, and you could argue that maybe the best years of Mourinho are behind us, and that's an argument you could make. I mean, he hasn't won a title in I don't know how many years, like 10 or something like that. So you could make the case that in terms of energy, he's maybe not the same person he was. I mean, that's an argument you could certainly make. And then, number 5, he's coming at a really difficult time. I mean, he's coming at a really difficult time with problems that look very hard to solve. So, is he really going to be able to fix all this? That's a big question mark. So look, there's plenty of good and there's plenty of bad, and you can kind of lean either way. The one thing I can say for sure is this is going to be so fucking entertaining because It's going to be entertaining because it's always a circus, and he grabs so much attention. And I think the idea of Mourinho back at Real Madrid is tantalizing in many ways because it's going to be really entertaining. It's going to be high drama. So it'll probably come with a lot of good and a lot of bad, and we'll have to see what the result would be. But it's not going to be boring. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun analyzing the situation on this channel going forward. But anyway, that's kind of what I think about the Mourinho thing, which, like I say, looks increasingly likely just based on the noise, the fact the club hasn't denied anything, and just kind of the noise is increasing. So it does look likely, and like I say, kind of fits if you consider all these variables. Okay, and just a quick word on the match last night. This was football porn. I mean, by the way, I'm pretty active on X now, so you can follow me there as well. But this was one of the best Champions League matches I think I've ever seen in my life. This was absolutely fantastic. And, you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, but the defenses were poor. That's just BS, okay? This was one of the best football matches you'll see. It was an exhibition. I mean, the transitions were incredible. The verticality of play, the quickness of the ball circulation, like both teams playing wonderful collective football. It was just with automatisms and with like reflexive play. It was just, and so much efficiency in front of goal. It was just, I thought it was a football exhibition, one of the best matches that I've seen in a long time. And it reminds us of how unbelievably far we are from that level. It really was a wake-up call, and I think reminded all of us of how far we are from the elite level. Because I think those two teams are the best teams in the world right now, and they put on a hell of a show. But again, it reminds us of how much work we have to do and how far we are from being at the competitive level we need to win the trophy that means the most to us, without any doubt, without any comparison. Nothing even comes close. The Champions League, the European Cup, is our baby. It's the one that we're obsessed with. It's what we live for. But it just reminded us of how far we are from being able to get there again. So if Mourinho comes, he's going to have a hell of a lot of work to do because we're nowhere near that level. Okay, those are my thoughts. Pardon the analogy. Don't mean to be insensitive. But, let me know what you think in the comment section. I think this is a really interesting subject. So let me know what you think. Thanks for joining me as always. Love you guys. And as always, a la Madrid.